The 1980s were haunted by more than just neon dreams and VHS static. Hidden behind the blockbuster glare were ghost stories that chilled audiences to the bone before fading into the fog of time. What if the real terrors of that decade never made it to your screen? Tonight we resurrect the lost spirits of cinema in 15 forgotten ghost stories, begging for one more haunting rewatch. Number 15. The Sender, 1982. At first glance, it looked like another psychological thriller lost in the wave of hospital horror films. But The Sender carried something stranger in its veins. The story followed a young man who attempts to take his own life only to wake in a psychiatric ward where his dreams begin invading the minds of others. The more he sleeps, the more real the nightmares become. Directed by Roger Christian, the film was marketed as a modest horror entry, but critics sensed something more cerebral and unsettling. Paramount grew nervous when test audiences complained the movie was too slow and too disturbing. They quietly pulled back on marketing just as The Sender started generating strong word of mouth from European festivals. Rumors spread that the film's dream sequences were inspired by real sleep studies done at British military facilities. Censors in several countries objected to the graphic depictions of suicide and the blurred lines between hallucination and possession. Many theaters refused to show it. When released, it barely earned its budget back and vanished from shelves. Yet over time, filmmakers like Quentin Tarantino and Martin Scorsese praised it as one of the most underrated supernatural thrillers of the decade. Today, its atmosphere feels prophetic, foreshadowing the psychological horror boom of the 1990s. The Sender remains a haunting whisper of what might have been if studios had not been afraid to dream darkly. Number 14. Ghost Story, 1981. Based on Peter Straub's best-selling novel, Ghost Story brought together four acting legends, Fred Astaire, Melvin Douglas, Douglas Fairbanks Jr., and John Houseman for one final chilling ensemble. The film follows a circle of elderly men bound by a secret from their youth when a mysterious woman from their past returns seeking vengeance from beyond the grave. Upon release, Universal expected a prestige horror event. Instead, audiences were unsettled by its slow burn and melancholy tone. Critics dismissed it as an old man's ghost tale, too restrained for the slasher-obsessed era. But beneath the genteel New England snowscape, the film pulsed with guilt and mortality. Every frame dripped with dread as the specter of lost love devoured each man's sanity. Rumors persisted that the production was cursed. Fairbanks collapsed during filming. Douglas fell ill, and Astaire swore he felt cold drafts and heard whispers on set. Some claimed the shoot location in Saratoga Springs had been a real site of hauntings during the 19th century. Though largely forgotten by the mid-1980s, Ghost Story has since been reevaluated as a somber masterpiece about regret, aging, and punishment. It dared to tell audiences that ghosts are not born in mansions or graveyards, but in the memories we try hardest to bury. Today, it lingers like the echo of a confession too late to take back. Number 13. The Changeling, 1980. Before haunted houses became CGI playgrounds, The Changeling delivered pure psychological terror. George C. Scott played a widowed composer who moves into an enormous Victorian mansion after losing his wife and daughter in a tragic accident. But something inside the house begins to communicate through music, through banging pipes, and through an ancient well beneath the floorboards. This Canadian production was modest but terrifyingly effective. Its mood was cold, deliberate, and grief-soaked. When released, it earned strong reviews, yet vanished under the shadow of louder studio horrors. American distributors cut several scenes deemed too bleak. Even worse, Universal dropped planned marketing after executives complained the film had no clear villain or special effects appeal. What most audiences never knew was that The Changeling was reportedly inspired by a true Seattle haunting. The writer Russell Hunter claimed he experienced the same events while staying in an old mansion on Cheeseman Park. Paranormal researchers flocked to the site for years afterward, though no definitive proof was ever found. The Changeling grew into a cult legend among filmmakers. Martin Scorsese and Guillermo del Toro have both cited it as one of the most frightening films ever made. Its restrained pacing and raw emotion paved the way for ghost dramas like The Sixth Sense. In its quiet despair lies the ultimate truth of ghost stories, that the dead never truly rest, and neither do the living who mourn them. Number 12. The Entity, 1982. Few ghost stories from the 80s provoked as much unease or disbelief as The Entity. Based on a controversial real case investigated in California, it followed a single mother tormented by an invisible force that assaulted her both physically and psychologically. Barbara Hershey delivered one of the most harrowing performances of her career, while director Sidney J. Furie filmed the story with almost documentary precision. Audiences did not know what to make of it. Some called it exploitative. Others believed it was too terrifying to be fiction. 20th Century Fox initially hoped for another Poltergeist-style hit, but test screenings left viewers shaken to the point of nausea. Executives quietly scaled back promotion, fearing lawsuits from skeptics and believers alike. Behind the scenes, Hershey endured exhausting takes of staged attacks that left her bruised and mentally drained. Crew members reported equipment malfunctioning without reason and strange cold spots in the soundstage. Paranormal investigators even visited the set at Hershey's request. Though nothing was proven, the stories persisted and lent the film an aura of cursed realism. When The Entity hit theaters, it divided critics but gained cult respect among horror purists. It dared to ask what happens when the supernatural targets someone society refuses to believe. In later years, it became an underground legend among paranormal researchers who considered it a cinematic echo of real phenomena. The Entity stands as one of the decade's most unnerving explorations of unseen torment. Number 11. The Fog, 1980. After redefining slasher horror with Halloween, John Carpenter turned his attention to the sea. The Fog blended ghost legend with maritime mystery in a way few films ever attempted. It began with a coastal town preparing for its centennial when a strange, glowing fog rolled in, carrying the vengeful spirits of lepers murdered by the town's founders a century before. Carpenter envisioned a gothic campfire story for adults, but production chaos nearly doomed it. The studio demanded reshoots after the first cut was deemed too subtle and not scary enough. Carpenter reluctantly added new kills and ghost effects to satisfy audience expectations. Yet the movie's real power came from its atmosphere, its mournful tone, and its whispered theme of collective guilt. Upon release, it performed modestly, overshadowed by Friday the 13th. Critics dismissed it as uneven, though some admired its craftsmanship. Over time, fans began to see it as a poetic revenge tale, more about shame than shock. The spectral crew members with their glowing eyes became icons of minimalist terror. Whispers persisted that some of the fog scenes used real coastal graveyards and that strange figures appeared on footage during editing. True or not, those rumors only deepened its legacy. The Fog has since drifted back into the public eye as a melancholic classic proof that sometimes the dead return not for vengeance, but to remind the living what they buried to build paradise. Number 10. Lady in White, 1988. Lady in White was one of the few family-friendly ghost stories of the decade, yet it carried a haunting sadness that rivaled any R-rated thriller. Written and directed by Frank LaLoggia, it followed a young boy in the 1960s who witnesses the ghost of a murdered girl and becomes entangled in the mystery of her death. Set in upstate New York, the movie used nostalgic Americana to hide its darkness. Shot through soft misty light and autumn colors, it looked like a dream from childhood until the terror crept in. Despite critical praise for its atmosphere, the film struggled with distribution. Major studios rejected it for being too sentimental and too long. La Loggia financed much of it himself, mortgaging property and begging investors. When finally released, it was praised for heart and horror alike. But small advertising budgets buried it under the summer blockbusters. Later, home video audiences discovered its gentle melancholy and slow burn terror. Rumors spread that the abandoned school where scenes were filmed had a real haunting. Crew swore they heard sobbing from locked rooms long after shooting ended. Today, Lady in White is cherished by those who found it late at night on cable or VHS. It remains a rare ghost story about innocence, empathy, and forgiveness rather than vengeance. In every whisper of that white figure drifting through the night, there is the echo of lost childhood and the ghosts we carry long after we grow up. Number 9. The Beyond. 1981. Lucio Fulci's The Beyond was never meant for the faint-hearted. This Italian supernatural nightmare blended ghost story, cosmic horror, and surreal art film into something that felt torn straight from a nightmare. It followed a woman who inherits an old Louisiana hotel built over one of the 7 gateways to hell, where the dead refuse to stay buried. The film opened to confusion and outrage. Audiences expecting a simple haunted house story were met instead with dreamlike scenes of corpses rising from mud-blind zombies and a world that seemed to melt into purgatory. Censors in the United Kingdom and Germany banned it almost immediately, labeling it obscene due to its extreme imagery. Even the American release was heavily edited and retitled to disguise its brutality. Behind the camera, Fulci pushed his crew through a chaotic shoot. Special effects artists used real animal remains for authenticity, while cast members endured suffocating heat and clouds of chemical fog. Many claimed strange things happened during production, including equipment breaking down and extras fainting during scenes in the flooded basement. Though dismissed as trash upon release, The Beyond became a cult masterpiece decades later. Its disjointed narrative was reevaluated as intentional an expression of eternal damnation that obeyed dream logic rather than realism. Today, horror scholars view it as Fulci's magnum opus, a terrifying poem about the collapse of the boundary between the living and the dead. Watching it feels like standing on the edge of oblivion, staring into a world where ghosts are not spirits of the past, but harbingers of what waits for all of us. Number 8. The Awakening, 1980. Before the Mummy franchises revived ancient curses with explosions and adventure, The Awakening treated them as something colder and far more tragic. Based on Bram Stoker's little-known novel, The Jewel of Seven Stars, the film followed archaeologist Matthew Corbeck, played by Charlton Heston, who unearths the tomb of an Egyptian queen rumored to wield power over death itself. From the moment the crypt is opened, his life and that of his newborn daughter begin to unravel in a series of eerie parallels, as if the queen's spirit were slowly claiming the child as her vessel. Directed by Mike Newell, years before his mainstream fame, the film was shot on location amid real Egyptian ruins, a decision that fueled whispers of a pharaoh's curse. Crew members reported sudden illnesses and camera failures near the tomb sets. During one shoot, a generator reportedly exploded, without warning halting production for days. The studio's insurance files later described the shoot as unusually plagued by malfunction and fatigue. When The Awakening premiered, audiences expecting pulp spectacle found instead a somber meditation on obsession and reincarnation. Critics called it slow, even dusty, but others recognized its quiet dread, the terror of realizing that what we call discovery might really be resurrection. The film vanished quickly from theaters, overshadowed by louder horrors like The Shining and Friday the 13th. Yet decades later, its melancholy beauty found new appreciation. Restorations revealed haunting compositions bathed in desert light, and scholars praised its fusion of archaeological realism with metaphysical horror. There are no jump scares here, only a slow suffocation of fate. The awakening reminds us that some ghosts don't need to rise from graves. They simply wait for us to dig deep enough to free them. Number 7. The Keep, 1983. Michael Mann, known for sleek crime epics like Heat, once made a ghost story of immense ambition and strange beauty. The Keep transported audiences to a remote Romanian fortress during World War II, where Nazi soldiers accidentally awaken an ancient evil that had slept within its walls for centuries. Adapted from F. Paul Wilson's novel, the film was intended as a grand metaphysical horror epic. But from the start, production spiraled out of control. Weather destroyed sets. Visual effects teams clashed. The studio demanded drastic cuts, reducing a 3-hour mystical saga into a 96-minute confusion. What survived was haunting but fragmented, a fever dream of stone corridors, glowing crosses, and ghostly apparitions. Paramount executives were horrified when test audiences reacted with bafflement. They shelved marketing plans and released the film quietly, with almost no promotion. Critics tore it apart, but viewers who stumbled upon it years later on late-night television saw something else, a haunted meditation on evil faith and redemption cloaked in supernatural form. Behind the scenes, tragedy deepened the myth. Special effects supervisor Wally Vevers died before completing the optical workforcing, rushed rewrites, and unfinished sequences. Rumors even circulated that the fortress set burned down mysteriously, days after filming wrapped. The Keep has never been properly restored due to rights issues, but its cult following continues to grow. Beneath its flaws lies something rare, a ghost story that dares to confront the darkness of war itself, where human cruelty and ancient spirits merge into one endless nightmare. In its ruins we glimpse not just horror, but the ghost of lost cinema itself. Number 6. The Woman in Black, 1989. Before the modern remake terrified theaters, there was the original British television version of The Woman in Black. Premiering on Christmas Eve, this haunting adaptation of Susan Hill's novel chilled audiences who expected warm holiday comfort. The story followed a young solicitor sent to a remote coastal village to settle an estate only to encounter the vengeful specter of a grieving mother whose child drowned long ago. Unlike flashier Hollywood horror, this version relied on slow tension and dreadful silence. Directed by Herbert Wise and produced by Central Television, it became an instant sensation in the United Kingdom, yet was never widely distributed abroad. American networks deemed it too bleak for television. VHS releases were rare and short-lived, causing the film to become a ghost itself, lost to legal tangles for decades. The production was minimalistic, but cursed with eerie coincidences. Crew members swore they saw shadowy figures reflected in windows, and strange footprints appeared on set after filming wrapped for the night. The actress portraying the ghost was reportedly forbidden from speaking to the rest of the cast to preserve her otherworldly presence, and it worked. The final reveal of her face became the stuff of nightmares. Though few outside Britain ever saw it, The Woman in Black has endured as one of the most terrifying ghost stories ever filmed. It taught viewers that horror does not need gore to haunt forever. Only grief, silence, and a single lingering figure standing just beyond the candlelight. Number 5. The Legend of Hell House, 1983. Re-release, originally made in the early 70s but reissued and rediscovered in the 80s. The Legend of Hell House gained a new life among VHS horror collectors. The film followed a group of researchers investigating the most haunted house in England, a mansion where an occultist's cruel experiments left psychic wounds that never healed. Though many dismissed it as a relic from an earlier decade, the reissue shocked 80s audiences with its intensity and tragic atmosphere. Critics who had once ignored it now praised its psychological realism. But there was a darker reason it regained attention. During its theatrical re-release, several theaters reported fainting patrons and sudden blackouts that fueled rumors of an actual curse. Behind the camera, the original shoot had already been plagued by odd events from malfunctioning equipment to sudden temperature drops. Decades later, when the film returned to circulation, technicians claimed the negatives were inexplicably deteriorating, as if the story itself resisted resurrection. The film's success in the rental market paved the way for a new wave of haunted house revivals during the decade. The legend of Hell House became a bridge between old Gothic terror and modern psychological fear. Its message was simple, yet terrifying. Some houses remember, and some souls never stop screaming. Number 4. The Hearse, 1980. Before haunted cars became cliches, the hearse delivered an unexpectedly elegant dose of supernatural paranoia. It told the story of Jane Hardy, a woman recovering from a painful divorce who retreats to her late aunt's rural home only to find the locals whispering about the cursed hearse that passes her house each night. The longer she stays, the more she realizes the town's hostility hides something ancient and personal. Directed by George Bowers, The Hearse mixed psychological unease with Gothic tradition. Critics at the time dismissed it as a slow cousin of the Amityville Horror, but its subdued dread and tragic romance gave it a unique flavor. The cinematography by Morikawa wrapped the countryside in constant twilight, making every shadow feel alive. Rumors soon spread that the film's real hearse, a vintage Packard, was plagued with mechanical failures and strange accidents. A stunt driver reportedly swore the vehicle moved on its own during filming rolling downhill with no one inside. Studio publicists leaned into the gossip, but distributors barely marketed it, burying it beneath louder summer thrillers. Today, The Hearse is remembered by cult audiences as a quiet ghost story about guilt, grief, and the objects we inherit that refuse to die. In its stillness lies a timeless terror that some passengers never leave their ride. Number 3. The Watcher in the Woods, 1980. When Disney ventured into supernatural cinema, it created one of the strangest ghost stories of the decade. The Watcher in the Woods starred Bette Davis as the mysterious caretaker of an English estate haunted by the disappearance of her daughter decades earlier. When a new American family moves in the woods, themselves seem alive, whispering secrets and summoning mirrors that reveal another realm. The film's tone was far darker than audiences expected from Disney. During its first test screenings, children screamed and parents stormed out demanding refunds. The studio panicked and pulled it from theaters after just 10 days to reshoot the ending. What followed became a Hollywood legend. 3 alternate finales were filmed, one involving alien entities, another featuring demonic possession, and one that was simply deemed too disturbing for any rating board. Behind the scenes, Bette Davis reportedly clashed with producers over the rushed rewrites. Crew members later claimed they heard voices in the real manor where shooting took place. When one camera operator fell from a scaffold and broke his leg, the tabloids declared the set cursed. Years later, the film was reissued with a softened ending, but by then its reputation had curdled. Still, the original cut continued to circulate in bootlegs and late-night broadcasts, becoming a rite of passage for curious horror fans. Today, The Watcher in the Woods stands as a relic of a time when even Disney dared to explore darkness, when the company's most unsettling story was not about magic kingdoms, but about the forgotten spirits trapped within them. Number 2. Next of Kin, 1982. From Australia came one of the decade's most criminally overlooked ghost stories. Next of Kin. Set in a remote retirement mansion inherited by a young woman named Linda, the film unfolds like a waking nightmare as she discovers her mother's diaries, describing identical hauntings decades earlier. Strange reflections in windows faucets, turning on by themselves, and a growing suspicion that someone or something is inside the house. Directed by Tony Williams, Next of Kin was barely released outside Australia. Critics who did see it called it European in mood, comparing it to Kubrick's The Shining and Argento's Suspiria for its dreamlike pacing and bold visual style. Its cinematography shot through warped lenses and mirrors turned the house itself into a living entity. Production lore tells of sudden blackouts that destroyed several reels during editing. The team rebuilt missing scenes from alternate takes, giving the final cut a disjointed spectral rhythm that somehow enhanced the unease. Though ignored on release, the film's reputation grew steadily through VHS collectors and horror festivals. Quentin Tarantino later praised it as one of the most chilling haunted house films ever made. Watching Next of Kin feels like descending a spiral staircase into memory, where every creak, every flicker of light might be your own reflection trying to warn you. Number 1. Poltergeist, 1982. No list of forgotten yet unforgettable ghost stories can end without the most cursed of them all. Poltergeist may have been a hit upon release, but what followed turned it into Hollywood legend. Directed by Tobe Hooper and produced by Steven Spielberg, it told the story of a suburban family whose home becomes a gateway to the afterlife. Yet behind its glowing television screens lay something darker than fiction. The film's success masked an eerie pattern of tragedy. Young Heather O'Rourke, who played Carol Ann, died suddenly before the third installment. Dominique Dunne, who portrayed her sister, was murdered shortly after the first film's release. Crew members spoke of bizarre electrical malfunctions and cold spots on set. Rumors circulated that real human skeletons were used in the iconic swimming pool scene, a claim later confirmed by special effects technicians. Censors debated cutting scenes of the corpses erupting from the ground, deeming them too realistic. The studio refused changing nothing, and the moment became one of cinema's most infamous ghostly images. Despite all the fear and misfortune Poltergeist endured as one of the most influential haunted house films ever made. Its suburban setting redefined horror, proving that evil could exist behind picket fences, not just in graveyards. Decades later, even skeptics admit the film carries a strange energy, one that lingers long after the credits roll. Whether cursed or simply brilliant, Poltergeist remains the ultimate ghost story of the 1980s, a reminder that sometimes the most haunted place of all is the one we call home. 15 forgotten ghost stories, 15 restless spirits of a decade that dreamed in static and shadows. Each one whispered of grief, guilt, and the unseen world that walks beside us. Which of these eerie films will you dare to revisit in the dark tonight? Like, subscribe, and share your pick below, because some stories deserve to rise again.